We're talking Philadelphia Eagles with one of the hosts of the Locked On Eagles podcast, Louis DiBiase, here joining us today. Thanks, Louis, for joining us.
Yeah, Cal, it's an exciting week. We've been really getting ready for this week for the last 4 months on the podcast and really the entire city of Philadelphia. It's a very important NFL draft this year. They all normally are, but for the Eagles, especially this year, kind of starting a new rebuild, it's going to be really important what they do Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And I'm kind of just ready to see what happens. We've been speculating for so long. Time to get some results now for sure.
Absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit of draft philosophy with you first. So they're up pretty high. You know, they were at 6. They moved back to 12. At this position that they're in, do you think they need to be drafting more based on best position available or based on need?
Yeah, so it's always a fascinating discussion. We actually normally do a show every year about this exact topic. Do you take best player available? Do you go for need? Do teams actually have one set philosophy, or is it kind of a mixed bag, right? I think, honestly, what I would do, I don't think you ever go in and just take the best player available, right? Because I think it wouldn't make sense if I use an analogy like you're going to a grocery store, right? And you have a list of things you need, and then you just get all this stuff that you already have a ton of, right? So if you have 5 cornerbacks that are 25 or below, and they're all core pieces of your future, you don't just take another cornerback because they're at the top of your board. I kind of look at it as kind of a middle ground here. It's the best player available based on needs. And so for me, you look at number 12, you're not going to need to force a pick at a position that you already have really good players at. And of course, the Eagles right now, they'll kind of need everything. So they might have the luxury of going best player available. But I look at, again, their biggest needs right now are cornerback and wide receiver. And you look at the best player available at 12, it's probably going to be a cornerback or a receiver. I look at 3 Alabama prospects and I look at 1 South Carolina prospect. It's Patrick Surtain, the cornerback from Alabama, 2 Alabama receivers in Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, and then J.C. Horn, the cornerback of South Carolina. Those 4 prospects make the most sense for the Eagles as a short-term need, as a long-term need, and also as the best player available. So teams, it's not really that black and white BPA or need kind of thing. It's just a combination of a lot of things. It's how deep the position is. Can you get a receiver in the second round so you don't need to reach for one there? There's just value to, you don't want to reach for something. It's a fascinating discussion, but I think with the Eagles at 12, they can kind of have the best of both worlds here.
So I've heard this a little bit more in the past days, and the Eagles, they're one of the most unpredictable teams in the draft. There's no chance of them moving back up, right?
I actually think there might be a chance. Howie Roseman loves to trade. If you look at his drafts since being the general manager over the last, decade plus, he's really only stayed put at their pick that they were supposed to have based on regular season standings only a time or two. And so he's already moved down from 6 to 12 because he could collect that extra first round pick. I don't think it's going to take a first round pick now to move up, let's say, from 12 to 8. Let's say Kyle Pitts, the tight end of Florida, also a Philadelphia native. Let's say he slips past the top 6. Let's say 4 quarterbacks go in the top 4. Let's say Jamar Chase and maybe one of those Alabama receivers go 5-6, right? Jamar Chase, then Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith. Howie Roseman could say, let's go get this guy, give up one of our third-round picks. We have 2 of them. We've got a bunch of picks next year as well. Let's move up 3-4 spots, and let's go get our guy. And so they might, again, kind of that best of both worlds thing, could collect a first-round pick next year by moving down. Now maybe you move back up with giving less value. So I do think it's possible. I think moving up or down is still definitely in the cards. Everything with Howie Roseman is pretty much all game, and it normally is.
I was going to mention going down next, but let's just say they stay at 12. Mm-hmm. Who would you like to see them land at number 12?
Yeah, so again, there's a bunch of guys that I'd be okay with, but I think the one I really, really like is Alabama wide receiver Devontae Smith. I just think you look at, and I know it's hard to justify, again, taking a receiver in the first 2 rounds 3 years in a row, but you can't let taking J.J. Arcega-Whiteside in 2019, taking Jalen Reagor in 2020, you can't let those picks make you say, well, now we can't do it again just to save face. Look, those picks right now, there's still hope for Reagor more so than Arcega-Whiteside. Those picks haven't worked out. You haven't had a 1,000-yard receiver since Jeremy Maclin in 2014. You have to get this position right, especially if you want Jalen Hurts to get the best opportunity to be the guy in 2021. I think Smith is the second best receiver in this draft, the Heisman winner. And I look at corner and receiver. Corner might be a more immediate need, but I think there's a more significant drop-off at receiver from pick 12 to 37. Whereas at cornerback, I don't think there's as big a drop-off between, you look at top prospects like J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain compared to Asante Samuel Jr. and Greg Newsome. So I think Smith's the guy if he is there at 12. I want a receiver or corner, and I think if I had my pick of the litter, it would be Smith.
Now, a lot of times as fans, we know this very well. What we want doesn't usually or even sometimes even occur. So who do you actually think that they land on Thursday night?
Yeah, look, I think that's a great point. I think outside of 2016 when they took Carson Wentz, they've never really took the guy that I was pounding the table for, right? That my guy, if you will, that a lot of scouts, media members, fans alike have. So if I had to put my money on it today, I would say it's South Carolina cornerback J.C. Horn. I think Jonathan Gannon would love him in his new defense. They need a cornerback long term right now. Outside of Darius Slay, they really have nothing at the position. And so you look at Horn, he has all the physical upside. He has that press man coverage ability, length, speed, quick twitch, flip of the hips. He's really a solid all around prospect. And I think he has the best chance of those four prospects I've mentioned of being available at 12. So I think JC Horn, but also Kale at the same time, this team's backbone is linemen, right? It's the trenches. And so if they took an offensive lineman like Rashawn Slater, or if they took a defensive lineman like Kwity Paye of Michigan, I wouldn't bat an eye because this team builds their foundation on offensive line and defensive line.
You mentioned Rashawn Slater. To me, if they go offensive line here that early in the first round, that to me tells me that they know that Andre Dillard is a bust. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's the thing. Offensive line, it's kind of that, again, best player available versus need discussion. Is offensive line a huge need right now? I would say no, with Brandon Brooks coming back, Lane Johnson. That right side with Jason Kelce as well, playing for at least one more year. That right side is solid as it can be. That was your core when you won the Super Bowl, right? And then at left tackle, you have two potential foundation pieces. You took Dillard just 2 years ago. You moved up for him in the first round, and he's barely played any sort of football. And then Jordan Mailata last year showed some incredible upside potentially as the guy at left tackle. But then at the same time, there's no guarantee on either one of those guys, Kel. And you look at Lane Johnson's had multiple serious feet injuries the past couple years. Brandon Brooks coming off a second Achilles tear in 3 seasons. Jason Kelce could retire at any point. Again, you don't know what you have in Mailata and Dillard. So there's a lot of potential holes at offensive line. So if they took one, it would make a lot of sense. And Slater is kind of a versatile guy. He could play left tackle, right tackle. He could even, I think, translate to guard immediately if you needed him in that spot. So offensive line's on the board. And I think, yes, if they do take one, it's pretty telling about how they feel Andre Dillard, what his progress is in year 3.
Team has 11 picks, including an early second rounder. That's one of the picks I'm most excited about because I think there's still going to be a lot of great prospects on the board at that time. What do you think is the most important thing that the Eagles need to walk away from this draft with?
Yeah, look, for me, it would have been quarterback. So I'm a big proponent of these top prospects, right? Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance over Jalen Hurts. Don't think Hurts has no chance to be the guy, but in comparison to these guys, I wanted them to come away with a quarterback in the future. It's not going to happen. So to me, once again, 2 positions Howie Roseman has not been able to get right outside of a few years since he's been the GM, and he's been the GM for a long time, is receiver and cornerback. So you not only need to, we've mentioned the top prospects right at 12, but you mentioned the 37th pick. They need to, and those 2 third-round picks as well, they have to come away with multiple foundation pieces at those 2 positions because those are the 2 positions that have killed this team. And again, yes, your foundation is the trenches. You have some potential holes there long term. They're going to take those positions in this draft. But to me, you've got to come away with quality product at receiver and cornerback. So that's what I've really hyped on for the last 4 months. And I'm going to continue to pound the table for those positions. They need to get that right. And if it means double dipping at those spots, then do it because, they've got to get it right. That's where the NFL is going. It's a pass heavy league, receiver and corners. You got to have them now.
You have one late round sleeper that you hope the team nabs.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple guys, but I look at one, and it's at receiver. It's Jalen Darden of North Texas. This is a player that I think primarily is going to play in the slot, but the Eagles need a slot receiver, and he is extremely explosive. One of the best receivers against man coverage last year, led the entire college football in red zone touchdowns. He's great run after the catch, return ability. Jalen Darden was a late round prospect, and you could probably still get him late day 2, maybe early day 3, but I could see a team falling in love with him and taking him much earlier. But I think I look at Darden late and say that could be, another 7th round, 6th round steal that Howie Roseman has had some success with over the last, I would say, 5 years. So I think Jalen Darden of North Texas is the guy that's really caught my eye and I think could turn some heads in the NFL.
The NFL Draft is set for this Thursday at 8 p.m. You can listen to Locked On Eagles anywhere you get your podcasts, and we'll have all your coverage leading up to the draft, both Locked On Eagles and Fox43.com. Thanks for joining us today, Louis.
Thanks, Cal. Can't wait for the draft on Thursday.